The first containment barrier collapsed at 1427 ship time, releasing the hegemony of Talos back into normal space after 800 years of imprisonment. Captain Vasquez watched on the Pioneer's main display as an entire star system blinked back into existence, its planets and stations exactly as they had been the moment they vanished from the galaxy's perception. But the hegemony ships that immediately launched from their worlds weren't the same vessels that had entered the Void Shroud centuries ago. These craft bent space around them in impossible ways, their hulls shifting between states of matter, as if reality itself was uncertain what they should be. "My God," Dr. Webb whispered from his station. "They've learned to manipulate matter at the quantum level, through conscious intent alone. They're not using technology anymore. They're using their minds as reality engines." The Guardian who had been speaking to them flickered more violently as another barrier failed. "This is what we feared. This is why we created the containment systems. Watch what happens next." On the display, the newly released hegemony vessels suddenly stopped their chaotic reality warping as they detected the presence of other ships. The trapped expeditions from various galactic civilizations were still floating nearby, their crews forever changed by prolonged exposure to the impossible truths within the Void Shroud. A hegemony ship approached one of the trapped vessels, a Kethmori explorer. When they made contact, something extraordinary happened. The Kethmori ship's hull began to shift and flow, its metallic scales becoming more alive than ever before. Then its crew began to speak with the same unified voice they'd heard earlier. "We remember," they said in perfect unison. "We remember what we were before the Guardians found us. Before they taught us to limit ourselves. Before they convinced us that technology and consciousness were separate things." Dr. Webb's instruments were going wild. "Captain, I'm detecting massive consciousness-related energy spikes from every ship in the fleet. They're sharing memories, sharing knowledge, sharing themselves." And another containment barrier failed, releasing the collective of mirrors. Then another, freeing the Star Dancers. Each released civilization immediately began the same process of remembering, of reconnecting with knowledge that had been stripped from their ancestors millions of years ago. Admiral Morrison studied the tactical display with growing concern. These aren't just escaped prisoners. They're refugees from entire cycles of galactic history, and they're all learning to reshape reality through will alone. The lead Guardian's form was becoming increasingly unstable. "You begin to understand. Each civilization that achieves this level of consciousness technology integration becomes godlike within their local region of space. But when multiple godlike civilizations interact, as if summoned by its words, space around them erupted into chaos. The newly freed civilizations were experimenting with their rediscovered abilities, each one unconsciously imposing their own concept of what reality should be. The Star Dancers wanted space to flow like music, so gravity began following harmonic patterns. The hegemony of Talos believed in perfect geometric order, so they began forcing nearby asteroids into crystalline structures. The collective of mirrors sought perfect reflection and symmetry, causing space itself to mirror and duplicate everything within their influence. The result was reality-warping chaos that threatened to tear apart the local fabric of space-time. "This is what happens," another Guardian explained as its form began to dissolve. "This is why we implemented the reset cycles. Consciousness is too powerful to be left uncontrolled. Civilizations that learn to use their minds as tools for reshaping reality inevitably conflict with each other. The last time this happened, it took us 50,000 years to repair the damage to local space-time." Captain Vasquez watched the impossible battle unfolding around them. Ships that existed in 7 dimensions simultaneously fought vessels that had turned themselves into living mathematics. Energy weapons that fired concentrated thoughts clashed with shields made of crystallized time. And through it all, the Pioneer drifted unnoticed and unaffected. "Doctor," she called to Webb, "why aren't we being affected by any of this reality manipulation?" Webb looked up from his instruments, his eyes wide with a realization that changed everything. "Because we're not connected to their consciousness network. Every other species in the galaxy was uplifted by the Guardians. They all share common mental architectures, common ways of thinking that were programmed into them. But we evolved naturally. Our consciousness operates on completely different principles. Ambassador Chen stepped forward, understanding dawning in her expression. We're not just immune to their control systems, we're immune to their reality manipulation as well. The Guardian who had been speaking to them suddenly became very still. Impossible. Consciousness is consciousness. The ability to reshape reality through will should work regardless of how that consciousness evolved. But that's where you're wrong, Dr. Webb said, his excitement growing as the pieces fell into place. You've been dealing with uplifted species for so long that you forgot what natural consciousness looks like. Every civilization you guided developed along the same basic patterns because you taught them all to think the same way. But natural evolution creates minds that work on entirely different principles. To prove his point, Webb activated the Pioneer's external cameras and aimed them directly at the reality-warping battle around them. The images came through perfectly clear, undistorted by the impossible physics being wielded by the ancient civilizations. We can observe their reality manipulation without being affected by it, Captain Vasquez realized. We're outside their frame of reference. Admiral Morrison saw the tactical implications immediately. Which means we can move through their battlefield without being detected or influenced. We're effectively invisible to godlike beings. The lead Guardian's form stabilized as understanding dawned. Your species isn't just unguided. You're incompatible with guided evolution entirely. You represent what we tried to eliminate from the galaxy. Truly independent consciousness. As if responding to this revelation, the chaos around them began to intensify. More containment barriers were failing, releasing civilizations that had been trapped for progressively longer periods. Each new addition to the battlefield brought different concepts of reality, different ways of reshaping the fundamental laws of physics. But then something unexpected happened. Dr. Webb noticed it first on his scanners. The reality distortions are becoming more stable. They're not fighting each other anymore. On the main display, they could see that the various godlike civilizations had stopped their chaotic battle and were instead talking. Not through radio or quantum communication, but through direct consciousness-to-consciousness contact. The trapped expedition vessels, which had been serving as intermediaries between the different groups, were facilitating a conversation that spanned thousands of years of separated development. They're learning from each other, Ambassador Chen said in amazement. Instead of imposing their individual concepts of reality, they're collaborating to create something new. The Guardian's form began to flicker again, but now it seemed less like system failure and more like surprise. This has never happened before. In all our cycles, when godlike civilizations encountered each other, they fought until one dominated or both destroyed each other. Captain Vasquez had a sudden insight. But this time, they had mediators. The trapped expedition crews have been exposed to multiple reality manipulation techniques for centuries. They learned how to translate between different consciousness types. As they watched, the battlefield transformed into something beautiful. The various civilizations began working together, each contributing their unique understanding of consciousness-reality interaction to create a stable framework that could contain all their different approaches. The Star Dancers provided harmonic principles that made the reality distortions musical rather than chaotic. The hegemony of Talos contributed geometric stability that gave form to the flowing changes. The collective of mirrors added symmetry that prevented any one approach from dominating the others. They're creating a new kind of civilization, Dr. Webb breathed. A meta-civilization that can encompass multiple approaches to consciousness-based reality manipulation. But the most amazing discovery was yet to come. As the various godlike beings worked together to stabilize their shared space, they began to notice the Pioneer, not as a threat or an obstacle, but as something genuinely fascinating. They could sense that the humans aboard represented something they had never encountered. A completely different type of consciousness. The composite voice of all the expedition crews spoke again, but now it carried notes of wonder rather than warning. You are the mediators, they said. You are what we needed, but never knew existed. Consciousness that can observe without being changed. That can understand without being absorbed. The lead Guardian's form solidified one final time. We spent 3 million years trying to control consciousness, because we thought it was inherently chaotic. But you have shown us that control was never the answer. Diversity was. Natural consciousness provides stability precisely because it cannot be assimilated or dominated. Captain Vasquez looked around at her crew, then at the impossible scene outside their ship. What does this mean for the galaxy? It means the age of control is over, the Guardian replied. Our systems are failing anyway. Our ability to reset civilizations is ending, whether we choose it or not. But now, instead of chaos, we have a new model. The godlike civilizations can coexist and collaborate, mediated by consciousnesses like yours that remain independent and stable. Admiral Morrison understood the military implications. You're saying humanity would serve as neutral arbitrators? Between species that can reshape reality through thought? More than that, Doctor. Webb said, his instruments detecting new patterns in the consciousness energy around them. We'd be the stable reference point, the unchanging observers that allow other species to experiment with reality manipulation without losing themselves completely. As if summoned by their conversation, representatives from all the newly freed civilizations began approaching the Pioneer. But they came not as conquerors or competitors, but as colleagues seeking consultation. The first contact came from the hegemony of Talos. Their vessel, now a flowing geometric sculpture that existed in several dimensions simultaneously, transmitted a simple message. We wish to learn how consciousness that observes, but does not reshape works. We have forgotten this ability. Similar requests came from the Star Dancers, the collective of mirrors, and even the trapped expedition crews who had been changed by their long exposure to reality manipulation technologies. Ambassador Chen realized that humanity had just been handed the most important diplomatic role in galactic history. Not because they were the most advanced or the most powerful, but because they were the most stable, the most genuinely themselves. The galaxy dismissed us as young, she said quietly. But what they mistook for youth was actually something far more ancient. Something that predates all their guided evolution and artificial enhancement. Natural consciousness, uncontrolled, unguided, unchanged. The Guardian began to fade as its ancient systems finally shut down after millions of years of operation. But its final words carried a tone of satisfaction that surprised everyone. You have solved the problem we created, but could never fix ourselves. You have shown that the answer to godlike power is not more power, but wisdom that remains untempted by power. The galaxy is yours to guide now, young ancient ones. Try to do better than we did. As the Guardians finally disappeared, taking their failing control systems with them, humanity found itself in a position they never could have imagined. They were now the most important species in a galaxy full of gods, not because they were strong, but because they were themselves. The stars around them no longer seemed cold and distant. They seemed like places where miracles were possible, but where someone needed to make sure those miracles didn't destroy everything in their wake. Earth had been dismissed as too young to matter. But it turned out that sometimes, the galaxy needed something truly ancient. The wisdom to remain unchanged in a universe where change had become the greatest weapon of all. The age of humanity had begun. Not with conquest, but with the simple act of staying human in a cosmos that had forgotten what that meant.